Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. You ready to get into it?
I am absolutely.
All right, so today's topic is something that's maybe a little bit personal for some of us,
Yeah.
but we're going to dive into all the research on nose picking.
All right.
So we're going to figure out why we do it,
Okay.
what some of the potential risks are,
Mm-hmm.
and also some practical tips to break the habit.
All right. Sounds good.
So are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's go.
Okay, so first off, why do we pick our noses? Is it just like a bad habit, or is there something more to it?
Well, nose picking actually has a medical term. It's called rhinotelexis.
Rhinotelexia.
Rhinotelexis.
Wow.
Yeah. And it basically just means, picking your nose.
Yeah.
But there's a whole bunch of reasons why people do it. Sometimes it's purely physical, like a dry nose or allergies, or even a sinus infection can make you want to pick.
So it's like an itch, you just got to
Yeah.
scratch.
Exactly. But it can also be psychological, like stress or anxiety or even just plain boredom can lead to nose picking.
Interesting.
And then in some cases, it can even be a sign of something more serious like OCD.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not just as easy as telling someone to stop picking their nose. There could be a lot more going on underneath the surface.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point.
Oh.
Understanding what triggers you specifically is key to breaking the habit.
Yeah.
Is it a stuffy nose that makes you want to pick, or do you find yourself doing it more when you're stressed? So that's really the first step, is figuring that out.
Okay, great advice. So now to the question, I think everyone's wondering, is nose picking really that bad for you?
No, yeah.
I mean, we all know it's not the most polite thing to do,
Right.
but are there actual health risks involved?
So it can actually be harmful. Think about all the stuff you touch throughout the day.
Yeah.
Your hands are covered in bacteria and viruses and, everything else.
Well-
And then when you pick your nose, you're just giving those germs a free pass into your nasal passages.
Oh, so it's not just the boogers themselves, it's like what we're transferring in there
Exactly.
from our hands.
And it's not just about infections either.
Okay.
Picking can damage the delicate lining inside your nose, and
Yeah.
that can lead to nosebleeds or sores or even sinus infections.
Okay, so it's more than just gross.
Yeah.
It's actually
Yeah.
causing some
Right.
damage.
Exactly.
Okay, but wait, didn't the research mention something about enlarged nostrils? Is that a real thing?
It is a real thing.
What?
Yeah, it's one of the more surprising consequences, I think.
I always thought that was like an old wives' tale.
Nope. If you're picking your nose constantly, you're constantly irritating and stretching the skin in your nostrils. And over time, that can actually cause them to become enlarged.
So you're telling me I can actually change the shape of my nose from
It is possible.
picking it?
It's possible, yeah.
Wow, I had no idea. Okay, and then there's the whole connection to fasting, which really surprised me.
Right.
Who knew there was a link between nose picking and fasting?
It's all about dehydration. Fasting, especially for long periods of time, can dry out your whole body, including your nasal passages.
So dry nose makes you more likely to pick.
Yeah.
Fasting can make your nose dry.
Uh-huh.
That's a recipe for disaster.
It is, yeah.
Okay, so for those of you listening who practice fasting,
Yeah.
what can you do to avoid this?
Well, staying really well hydrated during the times you are allowed to eat and drink is crucial.
Okay,
And using a saline spray can also help keep those nasal passages moist.
so just kind of being proactive and taking care of your nose.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so we've talked about why we pick the risks, the fasting connection.
Right.
But now let's get practical. For those of us who want to break this habit,
Yeah.
where do we even begin?
Well, I think it starts with addressing the root causes
Okay.
that we talked about. And, keeping your nose moist is huge.
Yeah.
Dryness is a major trigger, so using things like saline sprays or ointments or even a humidifier can make a big difference.
Okay, so creating a nose-friendly environment.
Okay.
Got it.
And then if you have any underlying conditions like allergies or sinus problems, treat those because that can really reduce that urge to pick.
Okay, that makes sense.
But sometimes it's more of a nervous habit, something you do without even thinking about it.
Yeah.
So in those cases, finding an alternative behavior can be helpful.
So like instead of reaching for your nose, you reach for a stress ball or something.
Exactly. Or even just focus on your breathing for a moment.
Yeah.
It's really about replacing that automatic response with something more positive.
Okay, that's a good tip.
Yeah.
So speaking of positive changes, the research mentioned mindfulness being helpful. How does that work?
Well, mindfulness is really about becoming more aware of your thoughts and actions.
Okay.
So when you notice that hand creeping up towards your nose,
Yeah.
you can consciously choose to do something else instead.
So it's like breaking that autopilot.
Exactly.
Got it.
Now, for some people, the habit is really ingrained, and it can be tough to break on their own. So if you're struggling, don't hesitate to reach out to a therapist or a behavioral specialist.
Right.
They can provide, support and strategies that are tailored to your specific needs.
Yeah, there's no shame in getting some extra help.
Exactly.
Okay, but before we move on, I have to ask about this honey thing.
Yeah.
You mentioned it earlier
Yeah.
as a potential remedy.
Yeah.
And I'm really intrigued.
Honey actually has some amazing properties that could be really good for your nose.
Okay.
It's naturally antibacterial, so it can help fight off those germs that you're introducing with your fingers. It's also what's called a humectant.
A humectant.
A humectant, which means it attracts and retains moisture, so it keeps your nasal passages nice and hydrated.
Okay.
And it also has anti-inflammatory properties, so it can soothe, any swelling or discomfort.
So it's antibacterial, moisturizing, and soothing.
Yeah, it's a triple threat.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Especially for people who are looking for a natural remedy.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. But even with all these remedies, I think it's important to circle back to basic hygiene. We talked about the risks of picking and transferring germs.
Mm-hmm.
But what are some general tips for keeping our noses, healthy and infection-free?
Well, hand washing.
Yeah.
That's the simplest and most effective way to stop the spread of germs.
Okay.
And this might surprise you, but aggressive nose blowing can actually be just as bad as picking when it comes to irritating your nasal passages.
Really? I thought blowing your nose was a good thing.
It is, but you gotta be gentle. Forceful blowing can actually push mucus back into your sinuses and damage those tissues just like picking would.
Oh, wow. I had no idea.
So blow gently and wash your hands a lot. Those are the key takeaways.
Okay. Gentle blowing, frequent hand washing. Got it.
Wow.
We've covered a lot of ground already, and I feel like I've learned so much about something I never really thought about before. But there's even more to explore.
Yes, there is.
So stay tuned, because in part 2 of this deep dive, we'll be getting into the social side of nose picking. Why is it such a taboo? And how do cultural norms shape our perceptions of this very common habit?
I'm ready for it.
All right, stay with us. Welcome back, everyone. So we've been talking about all the nitty-gritty details of nose picking.
Yeah.
But now I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about the social side of things.
Okay.
Like, why is this something that we're not supposed to do in public?
Right.
Why is it so taboo?
It is interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, it's something that pretty much everyone does,
Uh-huh.
but nobody wants to talk about it.
Yeah.
It's like it's this big secret.
Exactly. We learn as kids that you just don't pick your nose in front of other people.
Yeah.
But why is that? Is it really just about hygiene, or is there something more to it?
I think hygiene is definitely a factor,
Okay.
but I think there's probably more to it than that.
Mm-hmm.
Anthropologists think it has something to do with our evolution as social creatures.
Okay.
Like picking your nose, especially in front of others, can be seen as a sign of bad manners or even a lack of self-control.
So it's like you're giving off a certain signal
Yeah.
about yourself
Exactly.
and other people.
And, think about it. We have all these etiquette rules for other bodily functions,
Right.
like eating or sneezing or coughing.
Yeah.
These rules are there to help regulate our behavior in social settings and keep things running smoothly.
So it's like nose picking, even though it's a natural thing to do, it kind of goes against those unwritten rules of how we're supposed to act around each other.
Right.
Okay. But on a more serious note, for some people, nose picking can be more than just a habit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like it can actually be a sign of a deeper issue.
Yeah, we mentioned earlier that excessive nose picking can be a sign of things like OCD or other mental health conditions.
Right. So in those cases, it's not just about breaking a bad habit. It's about getting professional help
Exactly.
to address the underlying cause.
If you or someone you know is struggling with compulsive nose picking, it's really important to talk to a mental health professional. They can help you figure out what's going on and how to get the right support.
Okay, good advice.
Yeah.
So we've talked about breaking the habit with things like finding alternative behaviors and keeping your nose moist.
Right.
But are there any other natural remedies that people might not know about?
Well, besides honey,
Okay.
there are a couple other natural things that can be helpful.
Okay.
Saline solutions are great.
Yeah.
They can really help flush out irritants and keep your nasal passages moist.
Yeah, saline sprays are my go-to.
Yeah, and you can even make your own at home.
Really?
Yeah, just mix some distilled water and salt.
Easy peasy.
Exactly.
What else?
Coconut oil is another one that some people find helpful.
Okay.
It has antimicrobial properties, and it can moisturize the nasal lining.
Mm-hmm.
Just be careful not to use too much
Yeah.
because it can actually block things up.
Okay, good tip.
Mm-hmm.
So saline for cleansing, coconut oil for moisture.
Right.
Anything else our listeners should know about using natural remedies?
I think the most important thing to remember is that everyone's different.
Right.
What works for one person might not work for another.
Yeah.
It might take some trial and error to find what's best for you.
Okay.
And of course, if you have any concerns or, any existing nasal conditions,
Yeah.
it's always best to talk to your doctor.
Good advice.
Ugh.
Okay, I want to switch gears again and talk about something we haven't touched on yet.
Okay.
The role of our environment
Oh, yeah.
in nose picking.
Uh-huh.
Could things like air quality or humidity actually influence how much we pick?
Definitely those external factors can have a big impact.
Mm-hmm.
Things like air quality and humidity and even allergens in the air can all affect how dry or irritated your nose feels.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So if the air is dry and dusty, your nose is going to be more prone to feeling uncomfortable.
Exactly.
And that's probably even more true for people who live in dry climates.
Yeah, or during the winter when the air is really dry.
Right. So what can people do to combat that?
Well, running a humidifier at home can help add some moisture back into the air.
Yeah.
And air purifiers can also be helpful in removing allergens and pollutants that can irritate your nose.
So it's not just about treating your nose from the inside out.
Right.
It's also about creating a nose-friendly environment.
Exactly.
Okay, so now I got to ask about something I've always been curious about.
Okay.
Nasal irrigation.
Ah, the neti pot.
Yes.
It's become pretty popular.
Yeah, but I've also heard some mixed things about it.
Yeah.
Is it actually safe and effective?
I think it can be helpful for some people, but
Yeah.
you have to do it correctly.
Okay.
If you don't do it right, you can actually push bacteria and irritants further into your sinuses,
Oh, no.
which can lead to infections.
That's not good. So the technique is really important.
Absolutely.
Right?
Make sure you're using sterile water or saline solution.
Yeah.
And follow the instructions carefully.
Okay.
And if you have any nasal conditions at all,
Yeah.
it's always a good idea to talk to your doctor before you try it.
Okay, great advice. So we've talked about the social stigma, natural remedies, the
Yeah.
impact of our environment.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much there is to this seemingly simple habit.
Right.
But we're not done yet. In our final segment, we'll be taking a look at the future of nose-picking research.
Right.
What exciting discoveries are on the horizon?
Yeah.
And what could they mean for understanding and maybe even treating this age-old habit? All right, welcome back for the final part of our deep dive into nose picking.
Yeah.
We've gone pretty deep already,
Okay.
talking about why we pick the risks, the social stuff,
Right.
even natural remedies.
Uh-huh.
But now I want to talk about the future.
All right.
What's on the horizon for nose picking research?
The future of nose picking.
That's right.
Yeah.
Are there any groundbreaking discoveries that our listeners might be surprised to hear about?
Well, one area that I think is super interesting
Yeah.
is the research on the nose's microbiome.
Oh, the microbiome.
Yeah, so, the microbiome is that collection of bacteria and microorganisms that live in a particular environment.
Right, I've heard of the gut microbiome.
Right, exactly.
But what does that have to do with our noses?
Well, scientists are finding that the types and the balance of bacteria in our noses
Okay.
can actually have a big impact on our health.
Hmm.
It can affect everything from our immune system to how likely we are to get infections.
So are you saying that the bacteria in our noses could be playing a role in how much we pick?
That's what researchers are trying to figure out. It's possible that, imbalances in the nasal microbiome could be contributing to things like dryness or inflammation
Oh.
or other sensations that make us want to pick.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So are scientists looking into ways to manipulate the microbiome?
Okay. To maybe help people stop picking. That's definitely a possibility.
Hmm.
You've probably heard of probiotics for gut health.
Yeah.
Well, now researchers are looking at whether we could use specific probiotics to promote a healthy nasal microbiome.
So probiotics for your nose
Exactly. Imagine a future where you could just take a probiotic
and stop picking.
and reduce your urge to pick.
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so what other exciting research is going on?
Another area that's getting a lot of attention is the neurological side of nose picking.
Okay, the brain.
Yeah. Researchers are actually using brain imaging
Yeah.
to study what happens in the brain when we get that urge to pick.
So they can see what's happening in your brain when you pick your nose.
Yeah, they're trying to pinpoint the specific brain regions and the neural pathways that are involved in that behavior.
And why would they want to do that?
Well, if we can understand those neural circuits,
Yeah.
We might be able to figure out why some people develop compulsive picking habits
Okay.
while other people don't.
So it's not just a bad habit for some people.
Right.
It's like actually wired in their brain.
It could be.
Wow. So could this research lead to new treatments for people who really struggle with nose picking?
Absolutely. If we can identify the brain mechanisms that are involved,
Uh-huh.
it could open up a whole new world of treatment options.
Like what?
Well, we might be able to develop targeted therapies, like medications, or even things like non-invasive brain stimulation techniques.
Wow. That's incredible to think that something as simple as picking your nose could have such a complex neurological basis.
Right.
It's amazing how much we still don't know about the human body.
Exactly. And, as research continues,
Yeah.
we're likely to uncover even more fascinating insights into, the biology, the psychology, even the sociology of nose picking.
We've learned a lot in this deep dive.
We have.
It's amazing how something so common can be so complex
It is.
and how much there still is to learn.
Yeah, I think the big takeaway here is that understanding is the first step towards change.
Okay.
Whether you're just curious about nose picking or you're actively trying to stop doing it, knowledge is power.
I love that knowledge is power.
Mm.
Well said. All right, so that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the world of nose picking.
It does.
Thank you all for joining us on this journey.
It's been a fascinating one.
It has been. And remember, even the most ordinary habits can have extraordinary depths.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Keep those minds curious, everyone.
Until next time.
See you later.